Ooh.
Oh, that cheers me up every single time. Wow, welcome back to the Witchy Weirdos Podcast.
We're back. I'm Hannah.
I'm Tiffany, and today we're going to be talking about ghost towns.
We are
Very
indeed.
Interesting. We're not going to dive straight into ghost towns because Hannah has something interesting and spicy she'd like to share that I don't know about yet. But please go ahead.
Okay, so I read this article and I just loved it. I thought it was very sweet, kind of funny. So I thought I would share it with you guys today because I feel like we should stay on top of kind of like recent articles and who else am I going to share this with? So I am going to tell you about the self-proclaimed leprechaun whisperer, Kevin Woods.
What?
And basically, so this article I found on Unilad, obviously not the most credible source, but this actually is summarising an interview that he did on ITV.
Okay.
So basically, Kevin Woods is from County Lothian, Ireland, and he runs a Last Leprechauns of Ireland business tour. And everything about this article is fabulous, but it gets better. He says that he doesn't actually need to do this job. He has access to all the leprechaun gold. He's fine. He just does it because he adores it.
I love it.
And he claims that there are 236 of these mythical creatures left, and he is the custodian of them, essentially.
Wow.
So he said originally there were millions of them, but they've all died except for the 236 that are left. So what I love about this the most is this is based on, like I said, an interview from ITV that was on May 27th. So
oh my God.
In May, what is all going on in May? The pandemic. And what does Kevin have to say about the leprechauns during the pandemic? He says that the leprechauns have no problem with being in lockdown, which is good to know. And I just wanted to share that with everyone. I think it's very important to know that the leprechauns are fine.
I'm so glad that the leprechauns are dealing with this in such a positive way. I think
the leprechauns are chill.
We can already take a leaf out of that book.
So yeah, I found that article I just have to share this because I think that is fab. And I hadn't been concerned about leprechauns before, but I am surely glad to know that they are doing fine during the COVID.
Every time there's a world disaster now, my first thought's gonna be, but what would the leprechauns do?
What would they think? I think there was something on here, let me see if I can find it, about them. They had opinions on Brexit as well, I think.
No way.
Oh no, it's not opinions on Brexit. It's I remember seeing the EU and being like, oh, they must have had opinions.
Yeah.
No, these leprechauns are actually protected by the EU as a protected species.
No way.
But the only person who can see them is Kevin. So yeah, That's what I wanted to share.
Oh my God. Well, Kevin is amazing, and I'm so glad the leprechauns are doing well, and I'm very glad I know that now. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Well, we're about to dive into something very different.
Less cute leprechauns and more spooky dookies.
Absolutely. Do you want to go first, Hannah?
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
So I've got one longer story and then two little stories. So I'm going to start with the little ones. And what I'm going to talk about are two Australian ghost towns.
Mm-hmm.
And how I found out about these ghost towns is from a YouTuber called Amy's Crypt.
Ooh.
And Amy is an amazing YouTuber. She goes on a lot of ghost adventures.
Exactly what we'll do when the world reopens.
And she goes to kind of like off the beaten track places as well. So she's done ghost adventures in like India, in like, I'm trying to think, like Thailand, Bali. Like she goes everywhere and does these ghost like explorations. So she's fabulous. And so she visited I'm sure she's visited more, but she visited two ghost towns in Australia. So I thought I'd talk about those. And both of those kind of like, what I will say off the track now is the experiences are kind of more from her than they are like experiences of actual ghosts kind of thing, if that makes any sense. But I thought, like ghost towns don't actually have to be haunted. Like they are creepy enough in themselves, like with what they are. So
agreed.
The first one is Stenhouse Bay, and this is in Adeline, Australia, in the Innes National Park. And this used to be a mining town, so a mining settlement. And between 1913 and 1930, there were around 200 people living there. So it was quite quiet anyway. It's in the, again, like Australian outback, kind of a quiet place. And this used to be a settlement, but now it is completely down to a few buildings. And it's very eerie when you look at it on like the videos that she shows, because of that kind of the imagery of like Australia being very dry. It's got that very stereotypical like cow skulls and stuff like that. Like, it's very eerie to look at. But the second one is even further in the Australian outback, and that is the ghost town of Farina.
Ooh.
And this ghost town was a former farming and mining community. So there's clearly a lot of ghost town mining communities going on.
Yeah.
And it dates back to the years of 1878. So they initially, people would settle on this land because it was thought to be really fertile. But actually, they just had a spell of heavy rain that made the ground look fertile, and it wasn't. So it was not a success.
What catfish!
I know. I absolutely found that hysterical, and I know it probably shouldn't have been, but I was like, you'd be so bummed. So originally, the population grew to about 300 people. So again, quite small for a town. And one of the most significant things about this ghost town is that it has a cemetery.
Okay.
And it's very creepy. They've got, I think they are actually doing up some of the buildings to make it like a place you can visit. So they're protecting it, which is really cool. But it's so creepy to see this really traditional old cemetery with iron bars and stuff just in the middle of nowhere.
Creepy.
So the cemetery holds the bodies of the early Afghan camel train workers. Don't know what that is. I presume they built a railway track. Not particularly sure. And also a French lady called Miriam Bibi. And what is kind of very creepy about her grave is that she has kind of a fancy, bigger plot. So she must have been a little bit richer. And, you know, she's a French lady. Yeah. So her plot of land and her grave actually remain in perfect condition, whereas the rest of the cemetery around hers has completely decayed.
How?
So they don't know if this is a biological thing, if it is just it's in a weird place, I don't know, there's something blocking stuff from destroying it, or if this is a spiritual thing. They don't know whether the ghost of Miriam Bibi is, again, because I get the impression that she was probably one of the richer ladies, whether she's just maintaining her class and looking after her stuff.
Wow.
So, talking about this, Amy, the person who was investigating this place, had her own experiences while she was there. Ooh. So I thought I would just share those quickly to round it up. And so while she was there, she films with her husband, and her husband acts as her cameraman. And during it, his clothing was pulled. Ooh. And he is quite skeptical. So as you watch these videos and stuff with her, you see that he is very hesitant to kind of share stuff because, you know, he doesn't believe so much. So the fact that he thinks his clothes was pulled is quite significant. Ooh. And they also did a spirit box investigation. And they were in the old prison when they conducted the spirit box. And one of the words that came through was the big house.
The big house.
Which I just think is kind of crazy. Of all the places to be for that to come through. Interesting.
Very weird.
So,
very weird.
Yeah, they are my two little Australian ghost towns.
Oh my God. Wow. Mining towns as well. That's very interesting.
There's always, very significant, I think.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, nice. Well, mine's in Australia too.
Oh my God, what are the chances?
Yeah, my first one's in Australia too, in Tasmania.
Ooh.
And this is Port Arthur. So I actually heard about this a while ago. I think we learnt about it very, very briefly in school because it was basically an island that was colonised by the British as a prison.
Of course.
Yeah, naturally. So this isn't a ghost town so much as there are no people there. It's more that it really doesn't exist in the same way it previously did.
Oh, okay.
And it's mostly just a tourist hotspot.
Oh, I like that.
So It was a town and a former convict settlement on the Tasmanian Peninsula in Tasmania, Australia. So the site forms part of this thing what's called the Australian convict sites. It's like a World Heritage Property thing. It consists of 11, I think, different sites that were originally built by the British Empire during the 18th and 19th centuries. I'm sorry, but we were dicks.
I mean, yeah, I think that's what we can establish from history.
No, it's the British Empire have killed so many people.
I feel like the British Empire were just dicks, and then we popularised America, and then they carried on.
They took on the legacy, no offence.
Let's just offend everyone who could possibly be listening to this podcast.
We're offending ourselves.
Yeah, we're part of that.
Yeah. Interesting though, it wasn't really that part of it wasn't taught in school.
No.
But if it only takes brief Googles to realise the British are dicks.
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I digress. So originally the Port Arthur settlement, it was a small timber station in the 1830s, and I think it started in 1830, but it grew quite important because ships needed to be built. So shipbuilding was introduced on a really large scale in Port Arthur as a way of providing convicts with a useful skill that they could take with them when they were freed.
Oh, I like that.
Don't get too ahead of yourself. This place was bad.
I do this every time.
But by 1833, it had evolved into a proper penitentiary colony where the worst British convict and repeat offenders, as well as juvenile offenders, were sent. And I'll get into it in a minute, but it came a bit like a rehabilitation place.
See.
Oh, it was bad.
I don't get why you'd put your worst offenders and your repeat offenders in with your young offenders. How does that work?
I know. Believe me, there's worse here.
God.
So Governor Arthur founded the settlement on the revolutionary idea that prisoners could be reformed through psychological punishment, trade training, and religious education.
Oh man, I don't like where this is going.
Yeah, I know. So Port Arthur was established as an industrial, self-sufficient settlement that relied upon unpaid labour from prisoners. Some of the trades included collecting timber, shipbuilding, and shoemaking. And it was advertised as inescapable, with the surrounding waters rumoured to be shark-infested, and military personnel and guard dogs stationed at Eagle Hawk Neck.
Oh, God. So it's a bit Alcatraz.
So, very much so. And there's a lot about the things that happened in terms of the psychological punishment. Basically, any form of psychological punishment, really heinous things that you can think of that would happen in prisons. Very similar to Alcatraz, happened here as well. And it was very much cordoned off in this little island, and people were just sent there, and it was just bad. Port Arthur itself closed in 1877, but the concept of corporal punishment for crimes against society, it sort of is what gave way to these new methods of rehabilitation, which basically would obviously so much more cruel than induced, including forced hard labor, but that's kind of what this place just became known for. And prisoners who didn't survive either the psychological rehabilitation,
I can see you doing the air quotes.
Can you see me doing it? Yeah, good. Or the physical labor were buried on a small island cemetery, and it was known as the Isle of the Dead. And it was basically, there's I think over 11,000 people in mass unmarked graves, very much plague style, just thrown in there. It was really, really bad. This place was known for being just the worst. So many people were killed here. The criminals, yeah, but
still,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
important to consider how many of those criminals probably were mistaken or charged for something worse, or
precisely.
You never do know, do you?
Exactly. After the prison closed in 1877, it was such a spooky area if you look at it. The area was actually redeveloped as a town. So bearing in mind all of this horrible stuff had happened, it was this massive prison. It'd been completely shut down, over 11,000 bodies. It's creepy as hell. Then they're let's turn it into a town.
Why not?
Nothing's gonna go wrong there. But then there were fires in 1895 and 1897. That basically demolished the whole place, left loads of the original prison just like gutted, all of the local towns, things that were built, just completely gone. So bits of it were rebuilt, but then there was the massacre. It's quite famous, the Port Arthur massacre.
Oh God.
And basically, so on Sunday the 28th of April 1996, Port Arthur's like historic site, that whole area, was, it said, the scene of the worst massacre in Australian history.
Christ.
Someone called Martin Bryant drove up to like a really popular tourist spot, and opened fire on a cafe, gift shop, and just the surrounding area.
Oh God.
He murdered 35 people and wounded a further 23, and he's currently serving 35 life sentences with an additional 1,035 years without parole.
That's just like, yeah.
So, yeah, the killing spree prompted state and federal governments to enforce strict gun control laws within Australia.
That's what you do. When
exactly.
You have a mass shooting.
Listen, world. Listen, US. If you have guns, people will shoot
Drives
them.
me absolutely mental.
So yeah, and then in commemoration of those victims, there's now like a memorial garden and what they call a reflection pond. It's really nice, yeah. So that's why I mean, like, this place isn't necessarily a ghost town in terms of like the next one I'll mention, where like, you know, things are just like left and it's creepy. It's not like Silent Hill vibes, but like it doesn't exist in the same way.
It's not the same kind of
like,
thing anymore.
Yeah, exactly. But you can go and visit. There are like ghost tours and just like true crime tours as well. Obviously, like a lot of the people that were sent here were the worst of the worst. And, you know, there may have been some people in there that weren't, and it was massively overcrowded. There's all of these mass graves. It's insane. But parts of it, like, very much do stand and you can go visit. But it's not a town anymore. So I think it qualifies under the ghost
I definitely
towns.
say so.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it. Australia, Tasmania, Port Arthur.
Nice. Australia, you're good on your ghost towns.
They are. I think it's because it's massive
true.
land.
You've got a lot of space in Australia.
Yeah. But
well, mine is going to link on really nicely to yours. Because
no way.
I am doing an island. And this island also has many mass graves on it. So...
Hell. I was going to say hell yeah.
No,
but that's not good.
Similar, like, clearly great minds think alike here.
Absolutely. I love how we've not planned this, but it
works.
We're
supposed to be ghost towns, and we've both done ghost islands.
I know.
So I'm going to butcher this name, as per usual. Povigla Island. Povigla Island.
Let's go with Povigla.
So this island is located in Venice Lagoon, Italy. So it's actually just across from Venice. And this was originally a thriving island, but in 1378, due to the War of Italian words, Chioggia.
I know.
Chioggia, we're going to call it. The inhabitants of the island left, and the island remained deserted for 300 years. So,
wow,
like, already this island is a ghost town. Like, years and years ago, this is an old island.
300 years?
So 300 years. So we're now into the 1700s. So this is when the island became a lazaretto, which was basically an open-air cemetery. So, I know, I feel like I got a really good pronunciation on that one for a really, like, not nice word.
You made it sounded so fancy. You're like, mass open-air grave.
And it gets worse, because this mass and open-air cemetery was basically for people who were being quarantined or suspected contagious people, and they were sent there to die. So it just, like, the word gets worse and worse. And so this was basically like a death town, essentially. Like, everybody who was on this island was there with the intention that they were not leaving the island.
Is this a bit like, you know, that cave in Nottingham?
Yeah.
You know, like that one pit where they put all the plague victims in and walled it up? Is it like a similar concept?
It's kind of like you get them away from society and, you know, you can live out your life, but you're never leaving that island. but, you know, you would not want to live out your life here. They said that, like, bodies would just be left in the street to decompose. And they would burn lots of the bodies and just chuck the ashes into a mass grave.
Oh, I mean, it kind of makes sense.
It does,
you have
like...
for viruses and
it
disease.
Sucks. You wouldn't want to be on that island, but, like, it actually probably is a really good idea back then in the 1700s when you've not got the medical care to support these people. So it's suspected that more than 1,600,000 people died of bubonic plague on this island. So you can actually still find bones on this island to this day, and 60% of the ground is ashes. So
that's
it's still, like, the remains of life there is still very around.
Can you go?
So
can you go visit?
So basically, the only way to get on this island is illegal water taxis. So you'd basically have to get a water taxi from Venice to the island, but it's completely illegal, and you wouldn't want to, because there's one example I'll talk about in a minute, but of people who had to be rescued by the police because of how traumatized they were from breaking onto this island.
Oh,
and, like, that is
God.
not the way you want to get caught. Like, you don't want to be stuck on that island. So it's also suspected, very similar to Port Arthur, is that criminals were thought to be executed here, but it's thought that the executions would actually be by drowning, which is rough.
That is rough.
So it continues. We're not done yet. Like, this is an intense old island. So in 1922, so bearing in mind this island's kind of ghost town history started in 1378, we're now in 1922. They started building, why this is a good idea, a home for the elderly. And elderly, I'm doing my air quotes, because what it really was an asylum. So basically, if somebody was diagnosed with a mental illness, they were taken to Poveglia, and the island was basically used to isolate these individuals from society, which is just horrendous. Oof. Like, plague victims sort of can understand having it as an asylum. Nuh-uh. So this is where the ghostly stories start to begin. So many patients of the asylum would report seeing shadows of plague victims, and they could not sleep because of these spirits screaming. And obviously, like, this can kind of be debated a little bit, because if some of the people who were sent to this island did actually have mental health conditions, who knows? But I think it's highly likely that some of them definitely did see ghosts. So it was also said that some of the patients of this asylum were tortured to death. Of course, because asylums just can't be, like, nice places, and we can't look after our past mental health victims, can we? No. Like, this is one thing. At least, like, mental health care is getting there. Like, we're not doing that anymore, thank God. So there was said to be one specific doctor who was sadistic and who would do experiments on the victims. And of course, these experiments included lobotomies, because, like, it was rough to be in an asylum. So he actually had the belief that his cruel practice would be the cure to their mental health conditions. I actually don't believe that in the slightest. I think he was just
I don't believe
disgusting and gross. But he got what was coming for him. So the doctor was rumoured to be traumatised by the ghosts, and then I put in brackets of his patients, ? Because it doesn't actually say that in any of the articles, but, you know, I think if you're killing people and torturing them, it's going to be them. And then he was drove to jump, and then again in brackets I put, or be thrown off, ? The clock tower of the building. So either way, something tortured him mentally, and he ended up dying. Whether that's from suicide or a ghost, I don't know, but I think it's very well deserved.
Yeah, what goes
Exactly.
around very much comes around.
Exactly. So it is rumoured that you can actually still hear the bell from this clock tower chiming, despite the fact that it's been removed. So
Ew.
it just continues.
Oh,
So
God.
then in 1969, the asylum, thank God, was permanently shut down and the island was left abandoned.
That is so late for it to be shut
1969!
down. I know, that is so
Stresses
late.
me out. So in 2009, Ghost Adventurers, of course, visited the island. I imagine that they were actually there legally and like had permission from the government and stuff. But a lot of people don't, and a lot of people do try and visit this island. And like I said, it can end with you getting yourself arrested because it can be that distressing. So in 2016, a group of Americans had to actually be rescued by firefighters because they were in so much shock over the entities that they had experienced, which I just think is like, that's just not what you want when you're trying to illegally break onto an island.
Oh my God.
What someone has found is that you can, like, the common occurrences on this island are screams, of course, of, you know, possibly plague victims, asylum victims, everything under the sun. And the other really interesting thing here is the electromagnetic field of the island. So when you use a EMF reader, they are generally kind of used. It's believed that when there's ghosts, an EMF reader will indicate that they are there because they will create an electromagnetic field that would not be there otherwise. So in a lot of places, it can be really easy to debunk because there's so much technology that it can set something off. But what is incredibly interesting about the island is that there is no electricity within this island. So there is nothing to set this electromagnetic field reader off, but it is a very common occurrence. So if that's not a little bit of evidence, I don't know what is. It's just,
yes. I'm sorry, it's
really
blowing my mind.
Place. And all of these facts I got from a website/article called Italics Mag, and I think it is like a Italian touristy kind of magazine. So yeah, interesting. I love this island. I think it's so fascinating and so creepy.
I can't believe I've never heard of
that. And this is just off the coast of like the most romanticized place on earth, like Venice, Italy. I've been to Venice, Italy. Like
same.
And we didn't know there was like a massive ghost island just across the water.
We didn't know each other then.
Although, did you go on the school trip?
Very weird.
The music trip.
Which
is that
one?
How you went? Oh, see, I didn't go, but I was invited to go. So that could have been it, and we could have snuck off to the island.
Maybe when we didn't know each other and were too scared to do anything, we would have snuck off to this island.
You know, we can look at it in hindsight.
I don't think Tiny Hannah and Tiny Tiff would have done that, though. We still couldn't talk to
Social anxiety
people
was a real thing.
at that point. Oh God, well maybe I was going to say maybe now we do, but honestly I do have sense.
No,
it's not going to happen.
We're still good citizens. As badass as we like to pretend to be, we would never break onto an island.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like that's a few too levels far at this point.
Course, we will be there.
Absolutely. We definitely want to do some like abandoned places.
We need to work on our confidence for that, bad boy.
Yeah, maybe we'll do like something small first. Okay, well, thankfully this one's a tiny bit more lighthearted.
Stop talking about death and murder and mass graves.
That was really good though. I am going to have to go and watch a bunch of videos on that after this.
I think.
Wow. Very nice. Okay, right, moving on. We are now going to Kolmskop. This is in South Africa. And basically, it's when I've looked it up, it said it's a boom to bust ghost town.
This sounds good.
And now this place is a proper ghost town. Like the comparisons between what it used to look like and what it looks like now creeps me the hell out. No one is there. You can go visit it, but like it's not even too much of like a tourist spot. It's just weird. So this place is like in the middle of the desert. And it was once home to hundreds of German families, and basically everyone flocked there to try and make their fortune from diamond mining in the early 1900s. Yeah, so at the time, diamonds could literally just be found sat on the sand. It was quite, like, for a while, it was quite a really lucrative deposit of diamonds that was just, like, found. So basically, it started off where there was a railway worker. He found a diamond in 1908 when he was digging like away from the railway line. And basically it sparked a whole diamond rush in the area. And within like a few within a few like months, not even a few months, maybe even a few weeks, like hundreds of Germans basically set up home in the Namib Desert.
How random that it was just like a German community.
I know, that's what I thought as well. So at first, that whole diamond rush was like a complete frenzy. Like, people would go out at midnight when you could see the diamonds like a bit easier, because it was they would just shine, against the sand. And they would just spend the night like on their bellies, just like digging for these diamonds, and then they would sell them and like live the good life until they'd spent all of that money, because they would literally find all of these diamonds and then they would go, and it was insane. But then a bunch of strict German colonists, English, they tightened like the licensing around the village, and basically they turned the whole village into like a proper place. Like, there was a hospital, a ballroom, a power station, a school, a bowling alley, a theatre, a sports hall, casino, ice cream factory. I know, I did appreciate that. And also the first X-ray station in the Southern Hemisphere. And it was also home to Africa's first tram. So this place was like booming. Like, all of these people moved in. Like, one thing that I watched was like, in a matter of days, houses were being built. Like, that people just moved in. They swarmed on this place. It became a proper little town. It was fresh meat available from butchers, bread and bakeries. Bear in mind, this is in the middle of a desert. Furniture from like a local workshop, kids playing in like a public playground, and like that short railway line as well. And so they had all of these necessities, but bearing in mind, like, they were in a scorching desert. It was incredibly uncomfortable before air conditioning, and sandstorms were a massive problem. And they basically would like rage through the village and the water, which needed to be shipped in because the middle of the desert.
Think that one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like, it was apparently, water was often so scarce that people would like bathe in like soda water. And it says the soft drink plant. That's so I don't know what the hell that means. Soft. I don't want to know. I'm not even going to Google it. But basically, 300 German adults, 40 children, and 800 native Oambo contract workers lived in Colemanstock by the 1920s. At this point, there were wars. There was the First World War, and like all of these things, there was there was so much going on, and diamond production, because of all of these things, obviously slowly started to decrease. They weren't finding as many, and basically like diamond actual production there peaked at like the early 20s, and it was completely in decline until it just stopped in 1954. And basically what had happened was, and I believe this might be one of the biggest diamond reserves that was found, just like literally down the road, like literally a few miles down the road, there was the world's biggest diamond reserve that was just found. So basically that was more profitable than anything. So what did people do? People just packed up and just left. They just got up and they just left, and it was like, last one to leave, turn the lights off, we're never going back.
You can kind of just visualise like an angry little man throwing his pickaxe down, like, done, I'm done with this, and leaving.
Yeah, I'm done. Exactly, yeah. And that in itself, like, everything that's happened there, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, there's nothing that's super creepy or super weird, but it's just when you actually look at the pictures of the place, like, it's strange. Like, I'm talking normal homes, like grand stately homes, like I said, a hospital, an opera house, like so much stuff just completely abandoned, and it's all now like multiple feet deep in sand. Like, there are these massive sand dunes. Like, it's so creepy. And bearing in mind, like, there are all of these sandstorms, which are super windy, so basically like loads of things are falling apart, and it's just been left. It's just covered in sand, falling apart, just left there. There's also a random bathtub just like chilling in the sand dunes, which
From
I
all
thought
their
was a bit
soda water
weird.
baths.
Exactly, yeah. You can go visit, and people do have lots of like paranormal stories about it. Like people will say that like you can hear people in the town, and like in the middle of the night you can hear like people scurrying because of like people going out in the night to look for diamonds. And sometimes apparently it's really loud.
Yeah.
Like because it was such a booming place, apparently it's super loud even though there's nobody there. But yeah, you can go visit, but yeah, it was like raging diamonds, like, and then just
I think that's
nothing.
One of the creepiest things about it is that like it sounds modern with the cinema and the bowling alley and stuff like that, and you can really picture it as a town to then be completely abandoned.
Yeah, it was only abandoned in 1954, like, so literally like a lot of it is still standing.
Yeah,
and that's why
it's not had the time
so
to kind
weird.
of decay yet, really, has it? Crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think a lot of it is decaying as well because obviously in sandstorms, like sand is very rough. So exactly, yeah. Boom. Geography. Hell yeah. But yeah, that is that. Everyone just left and went to the town down the street.
So they literally they didn't even go back home to Germany. They just moved on to the next diamond supply.
Nope. Literally moved on to the next diamond supply.
You think you just commute?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll stay in my house, but I'll drive on down. Like, very weird.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, but
definitely more lighthearted.
Middle of the desert.
I think that's what we needed to like end on.
Yeah, I think so too. I've got before we end. I've got a paranormal update if you would like it. Yeah, so I think I messaged you a little while ago to say like some weird things that started happening again. I randomly started like hearing like the running and things again. But basically the other day I saw a message on Facebook, like weird things had been happening. I couldn't quite figure out like what the hell that was about. And I saw a message on Facebook from my little sister, and she'd had a reading from like she had a tarot reading and a mediumship reading from a woman called Eliza. And the woman was like, she was asking about my dad. And the cards the woman pulled from my dad were like, I have no more earthly bindings. So he was saying like, he's good now, like he's healed. He recognizes, you know, what he could have healed from when he was here, but he's better now. And it was really sweet. And there was another one that was like, I am one of your guides. So he's like one of my sister's guides now, which is really, really sweet. And she said to me, she was like, ever since I had this reading, my lights have been flickering again. And that hasn't happened in a few months. And I was like, no way, because I've been like hearing all of this really weird stuff. So we sort of like linked up about it, and I was like,
he's back.
He back.
Oh, gosh.
He back, yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice positive
It's a nice little update for you. Nothing creepy has been happening here, but I think it's because Josh has moved in.
Stuff doesn't experience so much if it's not the individual, does it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like, even when I'm home alone now, I don't hear too many weird things, and there aren't too many weird things that happen. I feel like whatever was here is like chill now, because it's like someone else is here. Maybe it was just
maybe.
Don't want her to be alone.
Maybe it was just kind of looking out for you as well.
I mean, whatever was playing all of those satanic songs and being really weird and scratching me, maybe not.
Because you were a female alone, then it was going for you.
Precisely. Exactly, yeah. I think now that my police officer boyfriend, who's all tattered and like does not care,
ghost.
It's
haunt him.
Exactly, yeah.
He doesn't,
I'm good.
He doesn't believe it, does he really?
He would cry.
He's not big on this. So freak with him.
He's exactly, yeah, no. Josh is not very he's very skeptical, but he's also very down for being proven wrong.
Do it.
So yeah, exactly. That's what I said.
Oh, I'm glad it's a positive one.
Yeah, that's my little update. And if there's anything else, I'll be sure to let you all know. That is it for today. That is it.
I thought we had an outro planned at some point, but I've forgotten it.
We probably did, but I've always forgotten it. Either way, we'll see you all next week.
It'll be a mystery,
no idea what we're going to be talking about. Yeah, it will be.
Bye.
Yeah, we do. See you all next week.